An investigation is underway into how two scuba divers were left out at sea by a diving company before being spotted by a Rottnest ferry. Jamie Freestone, one of the men, was helped on board by the ferry crew.
Yes, Monica, it happened on the March Labor Day long weekend, but details of this rescue off Hillary's have only emerged today. Rottnest Fast Ferry's Harbour Master vessel was about 2 to 3 nautical miles offshore, returning to the jetty when the crew spotted two scuba divers waving at them in distress. They pulled up alongside them and managed to get one of the men on board the ferry while the second held onto the back of the boat. It's understood Perth Diving Academy's Wildcat boat returned about 15 minutes later and they took the second diver back on board their vessel. It's also understood one of the men needed to go to hospital. Australian Maritime Safety Authority officers were at Hillary's today investigating, talking to Perth Diving Academy's director Troy Lane at his shop and at the company's boat. Are you confident that the protocols were followed? Can you tell us anything about what happened?
Well, I guess if you're going to screw up, make it a screw up that only happens once every 27 years. And who did this head count? Was it Heather McAllister?
Come on, you guys, line up and shut up. Shut up. I gotta take a head count. 1, 2,
11,
3,
92,
4, 5.
12.
Buzz, don't be a moron. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
So g'day everyone, I'm Dan the Safety Man, and usually when I cover an incident, I have to go and look up a bunch of things, but in this particular instance, I'm probably well qualified to talk about this because when I was younger, I was actually a professional diver. I started as a recreational diver like most people, then went and did my dive master instructor, and then went off to do commercial diving, which I spent the majority of COVID doing. So believe me when I say the majority of the diving industry would not see this as a mistake or a faux pas. This is, let's call it what it is, it's a fuck up. I mean, how can you blame the poor dive operator for losing 2 students? It's not like there's an abundance of material telling them how to run a dive. Oh. So when it comes to recreational diving, there's really no regulator. So when it comes to commercial diving, like going underwater and blowing stuff up or doing welding underwater, anything like that, you're going to be regulated by ADAS. They're the ones who are going to make sure you're trained before they certify you as a commercial diver. And then you're going to be regulated when you're working by your state regulator. So if you're diving off the coast of New South Wales, safe work. But once we get into recreational diving, we don't see that regulatory oversight. If something goes wrong, because it's a business or undertaking running the dives, of course the state regulator can still get involved, but they don't really have much authority to come in and do checks and that sort of thing to make sure people are doing it the right way. Most scuba operators have probably never seen a safe work inspector in their dive shop. Now, a small operator I'd usually leave alone, but because he's now been broadcast all over national news, we're really just going to have to say, yep, Perth Diving Academy really screwed up here. Now, it's important to note, Perth Diving Academy did have a larger body that they're a part of. They're called RAID, and they're a smaller sort of industry member for scuba diving and rebreather diving. But I would hazard a guess that even RAID would say you have to follow the ISOs and follow any local laws, because the local law that applies to him is the Code of Practice for WA, which says at section 5.11 you have to do a head count. Now, I don't see why you need a law or a guiding material saying you need to do a head count, because that's common sense. If we go out scuba diving on the boat with 15 people, we make sure 15 people come back. So in February of 1998, 2 American tourists were abandoned by a dive operator, and that mistake wasn't discovered for 2 days. They obviously ended up drifting away, and no one really knows what happens to them, but fair to say, alone in the ocean with nothing to keep you alive, yep, they're dead. Now in 2011, something similar happened where a tourist came back up from his dive and realised his boat had left him alone, but luckily for him, the diving company he was with had multiple boats in the area, and he just swam to another boat and jumped on that one. Now that one was very lucky for him, but that's still a huge, huge stuff up in the industry. You don't leave until everyone in your boat is accounted for. Now in this one, this is especially bad because they didn't realise their mistake, and these people had to sit in the water for hours before a ferry went and rescued them. The dive operator hadn't recognised their mistake clearly, otherwise they would have turned back and been there very quickly. Absolutely, not only can they be charged, I genuinely hope they are charged, because it will help the industry with a bit of a wake-up call. Now, there would be 2 charges that I would anticipate and see as reasonable. The first charge would be against the dive supervisor, that would be whoever was running the dive that day. And that charge would be a Category 3 offence under the Work Health and Safety Act. That is the lightest possible offence. So the Category 3 is you have a duty and you fail to meet that duty. You would establish that by the dive supervisor, that person in charge, had a duty to themselves and all the people they were supervising. And there is Section 5.11 of the Code of Practice, which they are expected to follow. And that talks about head counts. Clearly they didn't do a head count properly, they failed to meet that duty, and they'll get a fine. That is the maximum penalty you can get, and that you'll get a conviction recorded or not recorded depending on the magistrate's discretion or judge's discretion, whichever court it's heard in, and then you'll get a pretty nominal fine as an individual that's working in the dive sector. Now, the more serious charge would be the Category 2 offence, which is what I would see the dive operator being charged with. The reason I think Category 2 would be appropriate is because they have failed to comply with a duty, and that failure has exposed 2 individuals to a risk of serious injury or death. One of those individuals, I believe, was hospitalised, so that's a much easier offence to prove anyway, just based on their medical record. Now, the maximum penalty there is quite significant for a smaller operator, and would definitely be what would be sought. I don't think they'd get anywhere near the maximum given that no one actually died, but you would expect a fine of at least $200,000 in a matter like this. So, yes, there absolutely can be charges, and there probably will be at the conclusion of various government agencies' investigations. I know AMSA are launching their own investigation as to the marine practices and abandoning someone off a commercial vessel. And I expect that WorkSafe WA, or whatever they're called over there, would be launching their own investigation. So in any event, it is very, very fortunate that no one died as a result of this operator's, I'll just go out and say, gross negligence. There is no way that any normal operator in an industry would make such a stupid mistake. Now, I do hope that if they remain in business, they will change their practices and make sure this never happens again. But we will have to wait and see what the results of the investigations are. In any case, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you very much for watching.